You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Good evening, one and all, and welcome to the X-Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us live from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio. And our main website, where you can listen to the X-Zone 724-365, as well as the live feed, www.xzoneradiotv.com. As is in the news around the world, terrorism still in Paris. Today, authorities raided a place, 2 or 3 places in Saint-Denis, which is a suburb of Paris, where one terrorist took her own life with an explosive device, and law enforcement neutralized another. 7 were arrested. And this seems that this terror cell was just getting ready to hit its target. What the target was, no one knows. Police investigators from all over the world are trying their best to put sense into why this is happening and where the next attack is going to be taking place. I've asked a good friend of ours, Dr. Don K. Preston, to join us to give us his view of the senseless terrorism that is now spreading the world. Joining me now is Dr. Don K. Preston. And Don, welcome to the X-Zone. Nice having you back with us.
Thank you, Rob. It's always a pleasure and honor to be with you.
Don, what is happening? Are these is there any connection between what is happening now and the end days prophecies within the Bible?
No, absolutely not. The Bible is very, very clear that the last days that was foretold were present in the first century 2,000 years ago. It's really fascinating to me that Peter, shortly after the day of Pentecost, well, we could actually go to the day of Pentecost, and what happened on the day of Pentecost, the crowd was absolutely stunned and amazed, and Peter stood up and said, "Hey guys," to roughly paraphrase, this is what the prophet Joel foretold. Joel foretold the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in the last days, and Peter said, "This is that." So there's no question. I mean, if we're going to accept the Bible as God's word, having any power and authority, then we've got to accept that Peter was emphatic in saying that the biblical last days were 2,000 years ago, and that biblically the last days do not extend for generation after generation after generation. And by the way, this is one of the Achilles heels of the jihadist Islamic radical movement, Rob, that is being totally ignored. You know, you hear politicians stand up and you say, well, the Islamic radicals, if they just had good jobs, we wouldn't have this problem, as one American politician so ignorantly stated. And we're told that they hate America because of our wealth. They hate America because of our power. They hate America because of our friendship with Israel. No, look, folks, it's refreshing to me, Rob, that there are certain news outlets The Atlantic Journal carried a story. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Chicago Tribune. It was one of the northern states, carried an article on it. And basically the gist of the arguments was, if we don't wake up to the fact that what is driving these radical Islamic jihadists is eschatology, i.e. their view of the last days, and if we don't start countering that ideologically, if we don't start challenging that theologically, then they're just going to keep right on doing what they're doing, because they really believe, Rob, that they're bringing in the last days, that they're bringing in the final battle.
Tell me, Don, why, in your opinion, is this war going on still? Like, this is a 2,000-year war that is on between Islam and other religions, this quest to dominate, to take over the entire planet in the name of Allah. As a man of the cloth, so to speak, what is your take?
Well, it obviously goes back to the very nature of Muhammad himself. It is an absolute known fact. It is historically verified that Muhammad had extremely few followers until he came along and he gave the surahs that allowed his followers to pillage, to plunder, to rape, to rob anyone that they could conquer. Now, that's just a fact. I'm not trying in any way to be pejorative at all. I'm just simply stating the facts of history. He had very, very, very few followers. He wasn't making any serious inroads until all of a sudden he declared that those who follow him could do basically whatever they wanted to against anyone that resisted them, because after all, he's Allah's prophet. And to resist Allah's prophet is wrong. Therefore, if you resist Allah's prophet, then Allah's followers can do anything they want to you. And all of a sudden, it took off. Now, I'm absolutely sure that there were some very sincere people who believed that he really was the prophet of Allah. But this was a decisive turning point in his ministry. And when he... And perhaps we ought to do a little bit of a backstory here. As long as Muhammad was in a submissive mode, may I use that term?
Okay.
He was literally not aggressive. Now, that seems like a tautologist statement to say, well, when he was in a submissive mode, he wasn't being aggressive. What I mean by that, until he had gathered sufficient number of followers, military combatants, he did not even attempt to go to war. He urged his followers to live at peace with the Jews and with the Christians, because after all, they're believers in the book. But when he felt like he had sufficient followers who would be willing to pick up the sword in the areas in which he lived, that's when he gave the orders of jihad. And so from its very inception, well, as soon as Muhammad felt capable militarily to strike out and strike against his neighbors, that is when the conflict really began.
It almost sounds as if radical Islam is what we can call religious piracy.
I think that's a great way of expressing that. He was a strange character in many, many ways. Many people believe that he was a pedophile. I'm not citing that as a fact, but he has been accused of that, and in the writings, in the surahs, and I have a copy of the Quran laying on my desk, and I have read a great number of the passages in which violence, in which rape is permitted, in which murder is permitted. It's a frightening book. It really, honestly, is a frightening book. And yet, I want to say this, Rob, something I suggested a few moments ago. Islam contains within itself the answer to defeat Islam. Because while modern jihadism is motivated, driven by their view of eschatology, that we are in the last days. And by the way, Rob, Reuters has interviewed some of the militants in Syria on numerous occasions. And several of the jihadist warriors, the ISIS warriors in Syria, have said, if the world thinks that we're here just to fight against Assad, they're wrong. We're here to bring in the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I is the way that we would spell that, and integral to Islamism and the radical element that we're seeing manifested throughout the world is the belief that the 12th Mahdi will arise at the time and Jesus will come. In fact, there are some Muslim spokesmen right now who believe that Jesus and the 12th Mahdi are both alive, living somewhere on the planet right now. And, that they're waiting on this consummative battle to take place in Syria. Syria is seen as the focal point of jihadist eschatology. It's the place where they believe the consummate battle is taking place. So what we really, really need to realize, Rob, in our discussions of radical Islamic jihadism, is that what's taking place in France is a premeditated plot to get more nations involved, more nations that will come to Syria to join the great battle. These are not isolated outbreaks. These are not lone wolf type of attacks, as so many really, truly ignorant, seemingly, politicians want to characterize them. There's an overriding plot behind this, an overriding theology, an overriding eschatology that says if we can get the French to attack us, if we can get the Belgians to join, if we can get Russia to join, we want America to join, because we want them all to come to Syria, where, guess what? Allah will strike them all down in the great battle. That's the driving eschatology behind the jihadist movement.
As I see it, you've got a bunch of terrorists with, and I'll use this analogy, who are fighting a war with slingshots compared to the military might of the countries they're trying to provoke. Is this another example of David and Goliath?
I do not believe that ISIS has the military wherewithal in any way to defeat France, even, or even Belgium for that matter. If you just want to talk about how many tanks do they have, how many planes do they have, which is virtually none.
Right.
If you want to, if you want to talk about the number of soldiers, no. But let's not forget, even as rel-mar, who is a raving atheist for whom I have very little respect, except in his outspokenness against radical Islamism, stating we need to reach out and touch these people. It's about the only thing he's ever said. But he made a comment the other night that was very apropos. What is driving these people is theology. They believe they are doing this in the name and for the benefit and with the blessing of Allah. When our politicians stand up, Rob, and I really do not know, I honestly do not even know what the Canadian official position toward ISIS and radical Islam is, but I do know that when American politicians stand up and other politicians around the world and say, this is not a battle of ideology, this is not a battle against Islam. Now, let me make something abundantly clear. I personally know Muslims right here in southern Oklahoma who, when I speak to them privately, are extremely outspoken in condemning ISIS and the jihadists. They are adamant okay, I'm at their word, although I hold a little bit of reservation about whether or not they're sincere about that. But I do know that there are countless numbers of Muslims that would like to go about their business, practice their religion as they understand it in a peaceful way. They don't even want to impose Sharia law. However, it has to be understood that both in the Sunni and in the Shia branches of Islamism, Sharia law is the common bond that binds all branches of Islamism together. From the official formal statement of belief, as it were, that Sharia is the law that they want to impose on the world. And, I mean, we've had efforts right in Texas, just immediately south of me, Rob. Texas, with very good foresight, passed some laws outlawing the setting up of any extra, quote, governmental function that violates Texas law or federal law. Well, guess what? There were some Islamic communities right down there in Dallas who had already set up Sharia courts, they were practicing Sharia law right there in Arlington, Dallas area until they were discovered and reported, and the authorities disbanded them. Oh my goodness, that was just horrible, because after all, they've got a perfect right to practice Sharia according to their beliefs. And make no mistake, folks, you see, the radical Islamists not only want to practice Sharia in Muslim communities, they want to impose that right there with Rob McConnell. They want to impose that right here with John Preston. They want to impose that in every single community in the world. They don't want to be left alone, and they don't want to leave anyone else alone. Not the jihadists, because after all, Islam means, I was reading it in the Quran today, in the official version, with the footnote by the commentators, that Islam means submission. It means subjection. It does not mean, as some try to say, peace. No. It means submission.
Why is the President of the United States pussyfooting around calling certain members of the Islamic community radical Islam?
Look, I have to tell you, Rob, while I respect, obviously, the office of the President of the United States as an American citizen, I personally, as an individual, have virtually no respect for the person who is currently holding the office of President of the United States of America. I have stated, and will continue to state it until he is out of office, I believe that he is the most dangerous man who's ever held the office of President of the United States. When he stood up in front of the UN some time ago and said the future does not belong to those who insult the Prophet Muhammad, then had the temerity to say in his own book that if push comes to shove, he would stand with the Muslims against the world, then I don't have to wonder much where his true allegiance lies. When every time something like this happens, as in one speech not too long ago, when there was a radical jihadist attack, and he gives this speech in the Rose Garden, and he says, I just need to remind everyone that Christianity cannot be too proud and too arrogant, because after all, it hasn't been that long since the Crusades. And you just shake your head and you go, is this president absolutely that historically ignorant? Well, no, he's not ignorant, but he's more than willing to distort history when he said that Muslims helped found America. Give me a royal break.
Yeah, I missed that in history class. Maybe
I did too.
Yeah.
I must have been flirting with the girls that day, which was a pretty common occurrence.
You devil, you.
Yeah. So I must have missed that on those several days when the teachers were pointing out what a prominent role Islamism had in founding America. But all of those comments and a vast array of others, when he absolutely refuses, when he's virtually begged by other world leaders to take the lead in reaching out and destroying ISIS, and he refuses to do so. When France sent their airplanes against the city, I have a tough time pronouncing Mubarak or something like that. Something like that. Where did they get the intelligence to know where their planes were supposed to bomb? They got it from the United States because the president allowed that information to be shared. Okay, so here's the president of the United States that says his goal is to degrade and to destroy ISIS. He's known where their headquarters, he's known where their ammunitions depots are, he's known where their training grounds are, and he has not sent one single plane to bomb that area. It is only when the French asked for the information that he gave it and allowed them to go bomb the place. So, again, it doesn't take much to realize where his allegiances really lie. He takes every opportunity to condemn and to lash out against, quote, radical Christianity. He takes every opportunity to refuse to condemn, or to even, as you were pointing out a moment ago, he refuses to even use the word radical Islamist. He says that is not Islam. Well, in his defense, I want to be as fair as possible.
You always are.
When a misguided, quote, Christian, unquote, blows up an abortion clinic, I am very quick to say that's not Christianity. That is not the Spirit of Christ at work. So I understand on one level when President Obama says these men and those actions are not Islamism. Okay, I understand that. But why is he not willing to just lay it out and say these are misguided Muslims? These are radical Islamists who are perverting Islam, if that's what he actually believes. I mean, even when you had Hillary Clinton, the socialist/communist Bernie Sanders, and the other Democratic candidate, in their debate the other night, not one of them would utter the words radical Islamist. And, I mean, you've got that third candidate, and thankfully he will not, I mean, he'll be out of the race shortly. But here's a man who openly espouses open borders for all countries, not just America, but all countries. Yeah, that's exactly what we need. That's exactly what happened in France. In Europe, they have open borders. So you have Syrian immigrants going to Paris, blowing people up. Yeah, that's exactly what we need in America and Canada or anywhere else.
Let me ask you, since you brought up the border, so what is your take on the Syrian refugee situation? A number of, I believe at last count, it was 31 governors have decided that they are not going to bring in any Syrian refugees, that they are basically closing the borders to their states. Some others have talked about giving any refugee a religious test.
It's fascinating what's going on, and it's a little bit refreshing, although in one sense it's futile. Unfortunately, the executive power lies with the president in regard to this immigration issue. That's part of the Constitution. It's part of the power that has been delegated to him. So in reality, the bottom line is, Rob, President Obama can say to all 31 governors, well, too bad, guys. I don't care what you say. And obviously, the majority of those governors, at least the last count that I saw, were Republicans for whom he has nothing but disdain. I mean, he ridicules. He doesn't even dialogue with dignity and respect with the Republican side. He has an open disdain that comes out every time he addresses Republican reservations, Republican objections to his policies.
Right.
And all he does is ridicule them. Now, what's fascinating is that if the Republican side had any guts, I'll just use the good old Oklahoma term here. If the Republican side had any guts, if they had any intestinal fortitude, to be politically correct, they could defund all of these institutions that are given the task of bringing these immigration people into the United States. Well, unfortunately, the Republicans who are in control of Congress and Senate have not demonstrated any intestinal fortitude to stand up to President Obama on squat. Excuse my forthrightness here, but they were elected upon the basis that they promised they'd go to Washington, they'd stand up for what's right. They go to Washington and they've completely and totally capitulated to President Obama. Now, the newly elected Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, said he will introduce a bill into Congress tomorrow that will, in fact, limit the number, or I should say this, it will put more stringent background checks in place as necessary before these immigrants are allowed in. You know, it's disturbing to me, and of course it shows the hypocrisy. In 2011, Rob, President Obama himself, in light of the fact that in a terrorist attack in Europe, the fingerprints of a known Muslim radical, they kind of found a thumb after he blew himself up. They checked the thumbprint and found out that he had been an immigrant. So President Obama in 2011 actually signed into place some restrictions for allowing immigrants in. He tightened those restrictions. And yet now, when it comes to these Syrian immigrants, and look, let's be real here, Rob. The situation in Syria is so deplorable.
It is.
Our heart has to go out to the families that are suffering as a result of the horrid rule of Assad. And now ISIS is there, rounding up Christians, killing them, rounding up any Jews they find and killing them. Our heart literally goes out to those people, the, quote, innocent victims of this war that is taking place out there.
But let me ask you something, Don. How do we know that these refugees who are claiming to be Christians are really Christians? That they're just not using the word Christian to gain access into Europe, where once they're in, wow, you know what? I don't want to be a Christian anymore. Here's my Quran. Away I go.
Well, as a matter of fact, this is exactly the concern of these 31 governors. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the concern of Paul Ryan. This is exactly the concern, by the way, now of the head of the FBI. I mean, several leading military, law enforcement, as well as political leaders are now expressing the very concern that you have said. And here's one of the reasons why. Now, none of them have expressed this, Rob, but this is a reality. In the Quran, it allows Muslims to lie to non-Muslims in order to get their way and in order to ingratiate themselves. So, from the Muslim perspective, certainly from the jihadist perspective, it's perfectly fine to line up as this poor innocent victim from Syria, lost my family, lost my house, lost everything I had. Please let me go to Paris. Once you're at Paris, you connect with your fellow jihadist, you grab an AK-47, and you start spraying bullets, which is precisely what we know at least one of those men did. And now I saw one report today, they now believe that 2 of those jihadists were in fact Syrian, quote, refugees. So there is no vetting process. I heard the White House representative stand up in front of the camera the other night, and excuse me for being so jaded, but I commented afterwards he was lying, and someone asked me how I knew the guy was lying, and I said his lips were moving. That's how I know he was lying, because he's a representative of President Obama himself. And he said, we have a fantastic vetting process in place. We have extensive background knowledge. We can double check these people. We'll know exactly who they are. Well, guess what? The head of the FBI, who, by the way, is in charge of knowing a lot about these people, said, no, we don't know anything about these people. Don, I mean, it's just remarkable.
It is, Don. We've got to take a commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour is Dr. Don K. Preston, www.bibleprophecies.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. And I've got to tell you something, Exonation. I want the Canadian government to close our borders to Syrian refugees. It's that plain. It's that simple. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. First of all, let's start off by getting the following understood. I am not a psychic, medium, channel, intuitive, soothsayer, nor the practitioner of any art of divination. I am a Canadian, a broadcaster, a journalist, a publisher, and a realist. I tried warning people about the refugee problem with on-air commentaries and videos that I had produced, but no one listened. I was called a racist and every name under the sun. Well, look what happened in Paris on Friday the 13th, 2015. The X Zone was the first media outlet to openly make the Friday 13th connection and was the first media outlet to broadcast the fact that ISIS had claimed responsibility for the terror in the attacks on Paris. This is war. I hate to say it, but it is going to get worse before it gets better. My heart and prayers are with those who have lost family, friends, and countrymen and women in this war that ISIS has openly declared, again, against the Western world. The time for talking is over. We must support France and other free countries against Islam. We must close our borders to Syrian refugees. Again, we need to give refugees a safe zone in Syria by a military coalition where they can live and be protected and supported by the United Nations until the time comes when ISIS and their supporters and sympathizers have been wiped off the face of this earth, at which time the refugees from Syria can return to their homeland. The military and intelligence services must be given all the resources they need to fight this fight. It is time we stopped turning the other cheek and started fighting fire with fire. This is no time to be over-politically correct. For the X Zone radio and TV show and the X Chronicles newspaper, I am Rob McConnell.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Wilda Wieka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we will weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Wilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net. Radio's authority on the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology, celebrating 25 years of broadcasting. Broadcasting around the world and to the great beyond.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Don K. Preston is our guest this hour. www.bibleprophecies.com. We've got the Speaker of the House, Ryan, who is tomorrow going to address Congress. And what do you think will happen, Don?
I wish I knew. It goes back to whether or not Congress and Senate can conjure up a little bit of spine, which has been sorely lacking in the Republican side. It's very refreshing to see that 31 governors have stood up and said, we do not want these Syrian refugees. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you heard Chris Matthews the other night. Chris Matthews is a raving liberal. He has been consistently supportive of President Obama, to the extent that he's just been, oh my goodness gracious, just bowing and slobbering all over his feet at times. However, Chris Matthews on MSNBC, which I think a grand total of 3 people watch it, and I was one of them that night, but be that as it may, he said, this is a problem. We cannot ignore this problem. And our president should not allow these people in here without doing something about that can absolutely guarantee that they're not going to become radical jihadists. And he said, I've got a suggestion. And I'm going, oh boy, here we go. And he said, why are these people, these thousands of Syrian men, young men, coming to America and living while American young men are going overseas to fight for their country?
Exactly.
He said, we ought to send them, we ought to draft every single one of them that are of fighting age, military age, train them, send them over there and say, okay, you want your country back? Then go fight for it. And I'm going, good grief. Chris Matthews actually said something that made sense. And lo and behold, the very next night on Fox News, one of the commentators picked up on it and said, can you believe what Chris Matthews actually recommended? This is a fantastic idea. But, of course, President Obama is not even going to begin to do anything like that. He would rather American troops go live and die, those whom he does send, although he's not very aggressive, and we might be thankful for that on one level. But he evidently won't even contemplate the idea, is like, okay, we got 10,000 Syrian refugees, 8,000 of them from all of the pictures. You know, Rob, what has struck me in all the pictures, most of the pictures, I should say, of these immigrants flowing out of Syria and waiting to get into any other given country, they're all young men. Very, very, very few images of women and children. Now, if that doesn't send a chill up your spine and cause the mind to go, wait a minute, you mean to tell me no women and children are running from the war? Why is it that these thousands upon thousands of people that I'm seeing lined up for a mile or 2 or 3 miles down the road, why is it that every single one of them appears to be a young Syrian man under 40 years old? Is this not suspicious to anyone?
Well, I must say, Don, that I have seen many pictures of the refugees, and the pictures that I have seen include women and older people.
Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm glad you have. I haven't. Maybe it's just the American press being selective. I don't know, but I honestly have not seen.
But you know what? Nobody is mentioning, and I mentioned this a number of times over the past years, is that the prison system is the greatest recruiting center for Islam, and that, you know, the indoctrination into Islam is phenomenal behind bars.
No question.
So here you have all these people who have been indoctrinated into Islam who are being released right here within Canada and the United States. Nobody has clued into that, and that worries me.
This has worried me, Rob, for a long time. I have mentioned this to a great number of people, and I have some friends who have been very, very active in prison ministry. Mm-hmm. They're Christians, and they've been ministers in prisons, and they speak about this. They speak of the radicalization that's going on in the prisons, in which they, as Christian ministers, are trying to minister to people, and they're worried about it. And so it just blows my mind of how tragic it is, how naive it is, how blind it is, of how our leading politicians in America, you know, Nancy Pelosi stood up with 70 other Democrats. There was not a Republican among them, but stood up with, it was 57 other Democratic senators the other day, asking President Obama not to bring in 10,000 immigrants, but to allow 100,000 to come in. And you're just going, what is wrong with the mindset of a people, of anyone, that would be so blind to what's going on around the world as we witness now on almost a daily basis radical Islamists reaching out to kill people, vowing day after day after day in their broadcast, we're coming to America. We are going to kill America. And then we have American politicians saying, we want those poor blessed Syrian refugees to come. We don't want just 10,000. We want 100,000 of them. We don't have a way of vetting them, according to the FBI.
Right.
According to the National Security Forces. But hey, they're wonderful people. They would never hurt us. It is sheer stupidity.
Yep. Well, Hillary Clinton wants 65,000 in.
Yes, she does.
You know, and I'm saying here in Canada, our Prime Minister, the still wet behind the ears, Justin Trudeau, you know, has agreed to take. Well, he didn't agree, but it was part of the election promise he made to the ethnic communities in Toronto in order to get the votes, that he would bring in 25,000 Syrian refugees. And you know what, Don? There are so many Canadians that are already here in Canada who need the help of the government, that the government should take care of those in need here in Canada. In my opinion, your government should do the same, to help those in need in the United States before they allow more immigration, whether it's immigration or refugees, into the country. Canada's refugee immigration policy allows for up to 250,000 a year.
And America has a similar policy. And the incredible thing about it is, this has been pointed out on numerous conservative talk shows, on numerous conservative television programs, Fox primarily, that if you are an immigrant into America, the financial blessings, to use that term, the financial capability that you can get even as an illegal immigrant into America is more than a citizen of the United States can get when they are even in legitimate need. And you're just going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're willing to give American medical treatment. We're willing to give American driving licenses. We're willing to give college educations. We're willing to give welfare or Social Security and monthly stipends to people who are here illegally. We know they're illegal. And Americans who are in legitimate need. Look at what, here in America, it's still a farce as to what is happening to our veterans.
Big time.
And, at least Obama did stand up the other day and say, I'm still not satisfied with what's happening with the Veterans Administration. Well, that's awfully nice of him to say it, since not one single leading veteran administrator has been fired yet. In spite of that incredible scandal, yet not one of them has been fired. Well, I should say one of them was dismissed, as I understand it. But the entire structure that was so abusive, leading to the deaths of veterans, is still in place. And so Obama so boldly stands up and says, well, I'm still not satisfied. Well, bless your stinking heart. You have the authority to do something about it. Why not get something done about it? I don't mean to get on my soapbox too much here, Rob.
Oh, I don't mind. You're just echoing what many people have been saying that I've talked to over since the before the crisis that we have now. But take care of those in need first in your own country who are Canadians or who are Americans before you open the doors and say, come on in, put more strain on our social systems, our medical systems, our welfare systems. It's nice for these politicians to act as if they have these big hearts and that they're doing it for humanity. That's a bunch of bullshit. What they're doing it for is votes. Plain and simple votes.
There's no question whatsoever about that, especially in America when it comes to the Democratic side of the aisle. Mm-hmm. They will understand that if they put people on the dole, and there are more people on food stamps today than have ever been on food stamps in America before, and that is a purposeful strategy on the part of the Democratic Party. So if I'm an illegal immigrant, but I can get food stamps and I can live here in America, I can escape the horrific circumstances in South America with the drug cartels, the poverty, et cetera, et cetera. And even though I may not be rich here in America, I'll still be so far off better than I ever was down there. I won't be living in as much fear as I was down there. And oh, by the way, the government's going to give me food stamps to live, and they will even provide free transportation in different places of the country. And they'll give me medical treatments, and they'll even send my kids to school. Then, hey, you bet I'm coming to America.
Why wouldn't you?
I will most assuredly vote for the good old Democrats who voted to give me this good stuff.
Let's face it, Don. I've seen the pictures of Syria. It's an ugly country. It is an ugly country. And so you've got these refugees who now have an excuse, in my books, to try and get the hell out of there. Let's go to Europe, where there's mountains, where there's trees, where there's technology. Do the people really believe that once the fight in Syria is over, that all these refugees are going to want to go back to that ugly land?
Well, I've never understood, Rob, right here in America why anyone would want to live in New Mexico. Personally, I am a mountain and tree and creeks and rivers type of guy, so I've never understood that. And yet, you talk to people who have lived out there; they wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So I know that there is a natural type of rootedness to your home country. There is that level, but I agree with you 100%. It is an ugly country. Yeah. To me, there's no attraction to it whatsoever. I know, to get back to what we were just saying, yes, I believe that a large number of them would want to go back if there was peace. Many of them have families still there. They have land that is still there. So, yeah, they'd want to go back. But here's the thing. If the Muslims take complete control, and as the Muslims have complete control over different parts, even of Africa, and in different areas of the world, if living under Sharia law is so wonderful, why is it that so many thousands and hundreds of thousands of people want to leave that wonderful world and come to America, which they say they hate, and yet they want to live under this land of freedom? Well, the reason they're coming here is because they want to subject America.
Exactly.
To those horrible, horrific, oppressive, and suppressive laws.
And wherever you see a mosque, that is a sign that this is an area that has been conquered by Islam.
That is specifically and particularly the message that they are sending to them to gain sufficient numbers and to establish a toehold that is sufficient in any community so that they can say this is our mosque. Then they are saying we are here and we're going to conquer.
And I've got to tell you something. I have never seen, whenever you go out shopping, you can go to the airport, the train stations, and whenever you see Muslims, I'm sorry, it seems that they're always pregnant.
My wife has observed often that their goal is to out-baby us.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure but what that's correct. But you are certainly right in that. But Rob, I'd like to return to something we were talking about at the early part of this. I want to appeal to the audience. Those who have any interaction with their Muslim friends or neighbors or whatever that is. If you do not realize the danger of radical Islam, you need to honestly to take a look at what Islamism, of what the Quran actually teaches. By the way, I have several articles on my website, eschatology.org. The articles have been written by a very good friend of mine. His name is Mike Sullivan. He did a masterful job garnering the evidence, garnering the quotes, garnering the sources, the bibliographic references, documenting from the Quran, documenting from living Muslim authorities what the goal and what the aim and what the plan of modern Islamic leaders truly is. So first of all, you need to arm yourself and you need to be aware of what the Islamic plan for the world is. And that includes some of who call themselves moderates. We've got right here in America, Rob, an organization that is called CAIR, I believe. It's the Council of Council of American Islamic Relations. They have tried to pass themselves off as an innocuous organization whose only goal for existence is to bring about peace, harmony, and understanding between the Muslim community and the non-Muslim community. And yet, it has recently been revealed that CAIR, C-A-I-R, has been completely exposed as a quasi terrorist front who has received support from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, and other radical Islamic groups. So here we have this deceptive nature of one of the leading Islamic organizations in America, who, let me repeat, who has been saying that their only reason for existence is to create harmonious relationships and to promote better understanding between Muslims and non-Muslims, when in reality they have now been classified as a terrorist front group.
Sounds like a bunch of sheep in wolf's clothing, or wolves in sheep's clothing, yeah.
Yeah, that is precisely what they are. And guess what? President Obama has appointed several of his counselors in his administration who are leading members of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is funded by CAIR.
Don,
it is frightening in the extreme to see what is happening in our world, in what has historically been for over 200 years, the most powerful nation on earth. And yet from within, from the top down, America is being degraded. America is taking a back seat, and America is openly inviting terrorists to come into our nation and to kill us.
Don, before we go, and we've got about 2.5 minutes left, I'd like to get your opinion on what some people are suggesting, that mosques in the United States get closed down.
Obviously, that is an extremely, extremely difficult question. I am a firm believer in the freedom of religion. And yet, here's what I would say. I would say that we need to have agents who are infiltrating the mosques. When there are imams who are advocating the overthrow of the United States, that man should be arrested, that man should be imprisoned or deported, and that mosque should be shut down. You know, it is unconstitutional and illegal, Rob, in America, to advocate the overthrow of the United States government. And yet in Detroit, there was a huge marquee sign set up on the roadway outside of a Muslim mosque that said, "We are going to conquer America. We are going to kill you, and there is nothing you can do." Now, it seems to me that some steps, constitutional steps, should be taken that says, you are advocating the violent overthrow of the United States government. You are now under arrest. There's your plaque. You're guilty. Those are your words. You're guilty. You're going to prison. And by the way, it'll just be you and your Muslim buddies in the prison. You won't be allowed to interact with non-Muslims. You are going to either be imprisoned or deported. That's kind of where I'm at on it, Rob. Something has to be done.
I agree with you 100%, Don, and as always, great talking to you, my good friend. Do you think there's ever going to be a chance for worldwide peace?
Do you know what's happening in the Muslim world in some of the areas that are not as dominated by the jihadists, Rob?
No, I don't.
Muslims are being converted to Christ at a record rate as never before.
Yeah, but I have to ask you, with everything that's going on, is this just a ploy to gain sympathy and to gain access to the inner sanctum of society? Or are they serious?
Actually, I do not believe that that's what's going on in some of these regions. Remember, in these regions, these are not the radicals. These are not radical people that are being, quote, converted. Now, obviously, you're always kind of suspicious, but there seems to be an incredible movement in some Muslim communities around the world. I've been hearing more and more of it lately, and you just stand back and you go, oh, whoa, now this is promising. And oh, by the way, in France itself, just the other night, on the night of the attack, I don't know if you caught it, Rob.
Don, I hate to do this, but we're out of time for this hour. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Take care of yourself and look forward to the next time you're with us. www.bibleprophecies.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone. We'll be back on the other side of this break with the news as we continue talking about everything from the world of the paranormal to the science of parapsychology to social terrorism. I'll be back. Don't go away.